This domain name does not contain the Harry Winston trademark owned by the company that uses it in connection with jewelry. This domain name does not contain the CME trademark owned by the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And this domain name does not contain the Halliburton trademark owned by the Energy Services Company. But all three of these domain names contain something in common. They consist of characters that look very much like well-known trademarks. And at first, or perhaps even second glance, they could easily be mistaken for the relevant trademarks, which certainly must explain why cybersquatters actually registered each of these domain names, which were the subject of decisions under the UDRP, the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Policy, in the first quarter of 2023. So here are the domain names again. The first, which looks like Harry Winston, actually contains two consecutive letter V's, which resemble the letter W. The second, which looks like it includes CME, an abbreviation for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, actually includes the letters R and N next to each other, which appear to be the letter M. And the third, which looks like the Halliburton trademark, actually includes the number 0 instead of the letter O. Fortunately for the relevant trademark owners, UDRP panels easily understood exactly what the cybersquatters were doing in these cases. The issue arises under the first element of the UDRP's three-part test, which requires a trademark owner filing a complaint to prove that the disputed domain name is identical or confusingly similar to a trademark or service mark in which it has rights. As the WIPO overview says, this test typically involves a side-by-side comparison of the domain name and the textual components of the relevant trademark to assess whether the mark is recognizable within the disputed domain name. So here's what the UDRP panels said in each of these three cases. In the Harry Winston dispute, the panel wrote, "In this case, the disputed domain name looks like the Harry Winston mark. This similarity in appearance is sufficient to convince the panel that the complainants have satisfied the first element of the UDRP." In the CME case, the panel wrote, "The letter strings CRNE and CME in particular are visually very similar to the complainant's CME trademark, since RN can be read as M by internet users who do not carefully scrutinize the domain name. The very minor visual differences occurring in the middle of the letter strings does not prevent the complainant's trademarks from being recognizable in the domain name." And finally, in the Halliburton case, the panel wrote, "The disputed domain name is a slight typographical error of the complainant's Halliburton mark that simply changes an O to a numerical 0, which is a clear example of typo squatting." Now, in some UDRP decisions, panels have referred to this type of deception as using homoglyphs, but I typically refer to the issue simply as one involving lookalike characters. And of course, the examples in the cases I've just mentioned are not the only possibilities. In other real-life domain name disputes, cybersquatters have used the number 1 or the letter I in lieu of the letter L, given their visual similarities, or two consecutive letter N's in place of a letter M, or just the letter Q instead of the letter G. In every case, though, the cybersquatters' intentions are the same, which is to confuse internet users into believing that a domain name actually contains a specific trademark. And cybersquatters can use this confusion to their advantage in a number of ways. For example, in the CME case, the decision says that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange was alerted to the registration of the domain name by its cyber defense team, and that the domain name was used in connection with an email account to impersonate its employees in an attempt to phish its clients. Now, this seems to be a part of a growing number of business email compromise scams, and I know it's a growing issue because more and more of my clients are being targeted by this type of cyber squatting activity. But this type of deception, using domain names that look like trademarks by replacing one or more characters with those that are visually similar, is not a new tactic for cyber squatters. It's just that these recent decisions are an important reminder for trademark owners to be on the lookout for lookalikes and to consider using the UDRP process to eliminate them. If you want to learn more about the UDRP, please check out my masterclass on domain name disputes, as well as other resources on my GigaLaw website. And please be sure to subscribe to the GigaLaw YouTube channel to be notified of future videos discussing other internet legal issues. Thanks for watching, and see you next time online.